Write a letter with me. It's going to start, Dear Secretary Zinke, okay? But first, let me give you a little bit of background here. So, after that Tuesday debacle you had up here, Mr. Mickelson was to appear in front of the subcommittee on the Natural Resources Committee on Wednesday in the morning. So, that's my dates and times right, whatever it was. He was there pretty bright and early, and so as a member of that subcommittee, I was able to I actually shifted away from the subject of the committee that day. It was a piece of legislation. It was a good piece of legislation by Mr. Calvert. But I spent my time talking about this issue because we had our shot in front of the public on C-SPAN, in front of God and everybody, to have him answer some questions publicly here. So Debbie has graciously downloaded a couple of clips from that we got on. I haven't even seen them myself yet, so I don't know if my hair's real combed well that day or not. But Debbie, why don't you go ahead and shoot some of that there and crank it up by hinge on taking the acting role.
I would say that's probably a bit of a mischaracterization of
positive, please.
any communication I had with the secretary.
Okay, so I just asked the way the tape starts here, why? It's my understanding, and several of you heard the room as well, that he came out of retirement. He was not going to come back to Washington, D.C. unless he had a chance to work directly on the situation with the Klamath Dams and the Klamath River. So I asked him, well, sir, what is your particular keen interest in this project that this would be the only thing you want to work on? So that's the question. Go ahead and please roll it in.
Told Secretary Zinke that you wouldn't come back to Washington, D.C. From retirement unless you got to handle basically the Klamath project. What is your particular interest in the Klamath Dam removal project that you have so really hinge on taking the acting role?
I would say that's probably a bit of a mischaracterization of any communication I had with the secretary on that particular issue.
Well, that's what you tell people in the district, so, okay.
I have said that I volunteered for the Klamath as a matter of professional interest because I have about 35 years of experience with respect to conflict resolution on natural resource issues.
Does conflict resolution involve listening closely to both sides of an issue? People that are opposed to dam removal still don't believe they're being heard up there as a result of a couple of tours recently. So I asked you about the Hauser document a few minutes ago. What did you conclude from the charges brought forth by Mr. Hauser, who again was summarily dismissed when his views didn't seem to line up with the previous administration on the science involved with the dam removal? What did you conclude from that document? It was submitted February 24th, 2012.
The Hauser document referred to a criticism of a departmental press release, as I understand it, and in response to all of the allegations that were made here by Mr. Hauser, the department did institute an independent science review panel that went through that, and the science review panel did criticize the press release and how the press release was handled with respect to the specificity of some numbers, but they also upheld the department's action in doing so.
Oh, excuse me.
That's a press release. That's over a press release. Well, I'll continue. I yield back, Mr.
Okay, you have some time.
Now, I ran out of time on that portion. See, this is a couple of my colleagues yielded me. We're all given 5-minute segments during the committee to ask questions of the panel. So two of my colleagues were gracious enough to give me their leftover 2.5 or 1.5 minutes, and then I got my own 5 minutes. So you already heard some of the things that were different than some of the stories told. Two people up here about, you couldn't wait to come up here and be involved in this project. And that piece there about the Hauser letter, you all know about that. The Hauser documents or his science. It wasn't just about a press release, folks. It's about the actual information in there. So there's a couple more segments here. Let me get into a few more points here because my time is running out here as well. And just let me back up for a second. God bless you, folks. You can sniff them out really fast when they come up here, don't they? You had this guy on a rail within just hours, and so, and I know this is not what the Trump administration is about, okay? I know many of us, you folks up here, you good people up here, but had the pleasure and honor to serve in all my years in the state legislature since probably the first time I came up here to me was at Fort Jones Christmas Parade in December of 2001. Okay. 2001. You all are the salt of the earth, and you're the ones I think of back there. This isn't a politician blowing smoke. I'm not even that good at smoking cigars. But we really mean this. And so when I was in the state senate and the lines were going to be drawn and changed and all that, the Senate district I resided in was no longer going to have Sisikyou County in it. It was shifting in a different way to another Senate seat. Our Congressman Wally Herder, about that time, decided he wanted to step down and hand it over to me. He called me up. And so we noticed the congressional district had Sisikyou County in it. Said, well, where are you, Aaron?
Right here.
Where should you wave a little bit?
Back here.
Okay, back here.
Come on to the,
Aaron, what did you want me to do?
I told you there was no way we were going to ever lose Sisikyou County.
Yes. And that's how we felt.
And it was like, oh my gosh, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle. We got to keep you. And hopefully you're happy to keep us. But we are all in on this. I've spoken to some folks about mining a little bit here tonight, and we want to dig in on that as well. We're all in on helping people to continue to, or once again, dredge mine. We think that's beneficial for the river system, for the environment, for the economy, all that stuff. State of California is jamming on that. I'm going to talk to this gentleman, Mr. Buchel. Buchel, okay, I'm phonetically. Okay, we're going to talk about that some more here. But the issue at hand right now is pushing these people back. And so, as soon as this happened, Susan, go ahead, please. Susan, Aaron. No, I'm going to have. Good. I'm going to ask you all to write a letter here, and most of you have a pen. I think all of you have paper here. And we're going to carry these out of here tonight, and I'm going to give them to Secretary Zinke when we get back after next week. Okay? This is an urgent deal, and you all are not being heard. I'm going to remind him, 79% of the people of this county voted against dam removal on an advisory measure. I know you are tired of being the lab experiment for every cockamamie idea that comes out of Sacramento or out of Washington, D.C. from an environmental organization masquerading as a federal or state agency. Here's kind of a fun line. A few weeks ago, Ducks Unlimited has an annual dinner in Washington, D.C., making friends with making friends with the legislators and all that, working for wildlife and water conservation and all those things. So I was at this dinner, and a fellow from Northern California was hosting this table. Well, who sidled up to the chair right next to me? The commissioner of the Department of Fish and Game of California, Chuck Bonham. So we've had our times here. We've worked a little bit collaborating on an issue just over here in Sisikyou County on a particular bench there was having trouble with keeping their water delivery coming because of a misformed weir. So we were able to work our way through that and help get that done and get that fixed where they're still able to divert water as is their right. But every time Fish and Game or another regulator in California has an idea, they try it all on you. You're the experiment on this. You're the lab rats on this thing. I finally told him, when he sat down, and Director Bonham had a pained look on his face when he saw me at the chair next to him as he was sitting down as he walked in. I said, sir, could you please let up on the people of Sisikyou County for a long time? They're tired of being experimented. Every time you have a water vision or a water dream or a new wolf you want to introduce to the area, you want elk herds, you have a fisherman. These folks have bent over backwards to build fish screens, to accommodate in every possible way humanly possible under the guise of you and your colleagues down there in Sacramento to try and accommodate. When they got a little extra water in the stream, maybe at the end of the irrigation system, they can find a way to help the fish flow a little bit, they'll do it. They'll do it. These folks have been here 6 generations, 150 years. They just want to keep doing what they're doing and be left the blank alone. Could you just back off on them a little bit? He's just quiet, look down. He didn't even eat a steak. He left his meat on the plate. I mean, I don't know what that says. It says a lot. You know, one time I was at a cattleman's dinner. I think it was that very line-up table. I try to be a funny guy sometimes. There was a lady serving up there. I asked, right here. I asked, you know, ma'am, can I have the vegetarian dish? I'm just kind of feeling it. She looked up at me. Not funny, young man. I know, just kidding. Don't let that reputation get around. So, anyway, we're in this battle for you. Somebody asked me, I think maybe yesterday, like, well, you know, is Doug, is he back there? Is he all in on that, or is he going to be kind of afraid to go up against administration or the secretary or whatever? She said, no, I don't think so. Let me affirm that to you here in person tonight. No, I'm not afraid to go against these guys. I was just in the West Wing 2 days ago. We were talking about.
That's a heater.
Okay, it's a heater, so that's feedback. Okay. It almost sounded like that first note of a Beatles song. You know. If I get that, I might be out of my mind. I have a lot to think about on an airplane, okay, so. But, there it is. No. No singing. So, what was that? It doesn't matter. I am not in any way here to preserve my job. I think I preserve my job if I worried about having this job by doing this, by representing you, by battling for you. So, you know, if it comes down to talking to Secretary Zicki in stern terms, I will. Because you know what? He should know better. If he's from Montana, and his guy Nicholson, who straps a chainsaw on his back and does what to pregnant cows and all this stuff?
Craig checks cattle and goes out to the woods with a can of gas in one hand and a file saw in the other one.
Trying to establish a relation, relating the identity-wise. I didn't even come up here to say that when I first got here 16 years ago. I just say, you know what? Anyway, so, you know, can you sniff that one out really good? So, Debbie, why don't we run another piece of tape there since there's just something that's,
Which one do you want, right or left?
the one that seems like the last one.
In order to get it on the record here, 2 of the charges Mr. Hauser made in submitting that letter. One was, number 1, intentional falsification, motivated by Secretary Saladar's publicly stated 2009 intention to issue a secretarial determination in favor of removing 4 dams on the Klamath River, which was due March 31, 2012. The Department of Interior has followed a course of action to construct support for such an outcome. An example of this intentional bias falsification reporting of scientific results is contained in the September 21, 2011 called Summary of Key Conclusions, Draft EIS, ER, and related scientific technical reports. Other examples are provided by third parties. So, you talk about the press release. Yes, that is included in the second portion of the letter. And I will conserve time on that. But what we have is a problem here is that the science involved is not being taken into account by an unbiased party here. Indeed, that looks like a conclusion that's being carried forward, unfortunately, under this administration's officers. Are you aware also of another document submitted by a gentleman named Stephen?
Under this administration's new officers here. Now, somebody on the committee told somebody on my staff after the committee, like, hey, can you give us a heads up next time if your boss is going to do something against the administration publicly? They wanted a little warning on it. I forgot to give them some warning, okay? So for what that's worth, I don't think President Buchel has spilled all the water. I hope that makes it down south to my field. Okay, he's going to take my water from me. Don't get used to that term. President Trump, I don't think has an idea this is going on, okay? And in the West Wing, we had a meeting the other day talking about infrastructure. Part of my message was, indeed, we need to build infrastructure. We've got highways to do, and dams to do, and levees to repair, and this and that. But also, We don't tear down infrastructure if we're building it, right? We have a system here that supplies 70,000 homes with electricity that's that clean, green, reliable baseline power that you can count on anytime you want to turn on the switch. Not this la-di-da solar or wind stuff you have to wait for wind or sun to do. It takes a heavy amount of government subsidization, which comes right out of your tax dollar and right off your power. So that's not even the real world here. So Mr. Trump would not be for this if he was fully aware of it. So we are going to make him aware of it. I started out in the West Wing giving that information to his direct folks. I'm going to carry this information back with me. I'm going to carry these letters with me. And I'm going to ask you to make a video with me here too. Here's the chant I want you to say. I want you to say, "We are Sisikyou, hear our voice." I'm going to pan the room, so I want you to start saying it about 3 or 4 times so I can get everybody in the room on this. Okay? I want people to see what you look like, how many of you are came out here on a Saturday night when there's other things you could have been at. Boy, it's hot up here now. And so let's start. We are Sisikyou, hear our voice. Loudly.
Like we mean it.
We are Sisikyou, hear our voice. 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 We are Sisikyou, hear our voice.
Dear Secretary Zinke, ready? Spell Z-I-N-K-E, okay? Don't do it. We want the win. Dear Secretary Zinke, Z-I-N-K-E. K-E, all right? We in rural California are struggling. The last 8 years, our government has treated us as a laboratory experiment. And you can write it how you wish, but this is just a ballpark. This is a challenge. Yeah, we probably want to look at the fact that you're writing them with a pen on paper instead of an email, okay? I'll just give ideas and you'll do crib sheets or whatever. I want you to write one down too, Sam. Where are you going?
I got it.
Say you got it.
250 people show up at a meeting and sort of grumble a little bit at Mickelson. Mickelson has to feel like his life is in danger. Mickelson has to feel like there's angry mobs. You know, the people in Klamath Falls would have had their water cut off completely in 2001, but for one thing, some of those people had the guts to go up and chain themselves to those head gates. And it got to the national media, and then up high on Mount Olympus, you know, there was President Bush, and he kind of said, "What the hell's going on here? Can't you guys do something about this?" Well, we're not going to get anywhere until President Trump says, "What the hell's going on here? Can't you guys do something about this?" You know, it's very nice that that we have, you know, listen, hear our voice, hear our voice. It should be fire Deputy Reclamation Commissioner Mickelson. Fire him. Get rid of him. For God's sakes. We don't want somebody who goes on rafting trips with the likes of, what's that guy's name? Tucker? Tucker? We don't want rafting. We don't want his rafting buddy. You know, if Trump knew that this guy was Tucker's rafting buddy, he'd be like on The Apprentice. You're fired. That's what we want. That's what we want from Trump. That's what we've always wanted from Trump. You're fired. And letters are not enough. Letters are not enough, you know. The phone should be ringing up with people calling up and saying, you know, you can't do this to us. You know, we're going to make you pay for doing this to us. People should be calling every day, every day, every day. What would happen if every person in Sisikyou County made a call once a day back to Washington and said, you know, what the hell are you people doing? We're sick of this. Stop us. You know, and your officials, every week or so, officials go back to Washington, D.C. Senator Dennis Linthicum from Klamath County was there last week. Was he singing this song? No. You have to put the fire to your officials. You have to make this #1 for them. You know what? Because they're not going to take care of this problem for you by themselves. He told you he can't do it by himself. He can't. And they've got a lot of things to do. They care about being reelected, make it comfortable. They've got all these political things going. It's not going to be natural to them to step out of this role of playing nice, okay? Because playing nice hasn't gotten you anywhere in a quarter of a century. It's not going to be natural for them to change the way they're doing things. I don't mean to pick on people, but what about your commissioners? You know, they write a letter back east, and we have concerns about the dam removal. We've got concerns. Concerns? You know, it should be, what are you people, nuts? You know, what the hell are you people doing? Are you insane? That's the type of level of confrontation that is required to elevate an issue to the point where people pay attention to it. You know, it's not like, oh, can't we find some other way to do fish passage so we can keep them? No, it's, forget fish passage. We don't need fish passage. It's only the top tip, and we got plenty of fish. And if the Indians were herding them into gill nets and massacring them en masse, there would be plenty of salmon. So, people have to like reorient the way they're thinking about this if they actually want to win. And there's also a lot of people you've got to attack. I don't know what your newspapers are like down here in Sisikyou. But I know a lot about the newspapers in Klamath County, and they've got a newspaper out there that reminds me of what happened during the Revolutionary War. It's not happening now. In the Revolutionary War, you had the Tory papers and the Revolutionary papers. And you know what happened to the Tory papers? They went out of business, okay? Because people would say, hey, I'm not going to advertise in a paper that is carrying water for Tucker and the Kuruk tribe. I'm not going to subscribe to a paper who is telling us how we should just all bend over and get used to this, and was reporting on what a great guy Mickelson is for telling us that. It's pretty simple, but you have to actually, you know, cancel the subscription. You have to actually tell businesses, I saw your ad in the paper. What the hell are you doing advertising with the enemy? Okay? Until the enemy folds. Until your newspaper becomes something that's leading the struggle and is helping you and telling you what to do and where to go and spreading the information instead of spreading a bunch of damn lies like, oh, there wasn't enough water because of the farmers and that caused a fish kill and so everyone was upset and that's why the dams have to come out. I mean, that's what you read in the paper.
The Medford Mail Tribune, but not the Sisikyou Daily.
No, I don't know much about the Sisikyou Daily. That's, I'm telling you, that's so. But it's about focusing on and uniting the community. You know, what would it be like if when these federal fish biologists came to Sisikyou County, no one would serve them in a restaurant? What would it be like if Mickelson tried to book a room in the Miners Inn and he couldn't get one? He'd have to sleep in his car. What would it be like if people in this community actually reacted to a bunch of liars and crooks the way people used to react to liars and crooks? Because you know what? The liars and crooks are going to keep winning until you react differently. And government itself, you know, take a lesson from the left, for God's sakes. You know, when the left has control of the government, that government is all about the left. The left doesn't like immigration. So if you're the city of Oakland, you're out giving free parking and supporting the protesters against the INS. If you're the city city of Oakland. If you're the city of Portland, your judges are letting the illegal aliens out the back door of the courthouse so they can't be arrested. You know, government itself is an engine that can fight this struggle for you. But it's not happening now, really. A letter expressing concerns just doesn't cut the mustard, guys. It really doesn't. You have to wake up. You have to stop tolerating bad behavior. Now, some of you might think we should attack the Indians too, and I've said some unkind things about the Indians and what they're accomplishing. But let me tell you something about the Indians. This struggle could be solved a lot faster if the Indians were part of the utility district or whatever it is that runs these dams. Because you know what? If the Indians were suddenly making a ton of money off of these dams, all of a sudden, the fish in the dams would be just fine. There'd be no problem with tribal rights at all. Now, some of you are looking at me like, I don't believe that, okay? Go look up the case of the relicensing of the dams on the Deschutes River. You know how Portland General Electric Company got those dams relicensed? It made the local tribes partners in the money coming off the dams, and suddenly all of the fish problems and the tribal problems were gone. So people have to think politically about these things. It can be done. It can be done. So anyway, that's why I'm here. I dream, and perhaps I will go to my grave dreaming, of a governor that stands up to the madness and evil that is raining down on this community and on Klamath County. I imagine a county where there's sawmills running again instead of drug treatment centers. I imagine a county where there's mining companies running instead of casinos. I imagine a county where young people can stay because their future hasn't been choked away by a bunch of evil, narcissistic monsters. So there's only one thing you guys really need here, okay? It's courage. The secret of freedom is courage. I hope to God you have the courage to go out and protect your community here. Courage is contagious. Each one of you that starts to show it, it'll spread to others. And there's a lot of people like me who would like to help you in that fight. Thank you very much.
I'm going to try not to spill my water. There. You know, it's nice to be back in Sisikyou. It's nice to be back near the Klamath area, the whole Klamath Basin. I feel like I'm home again. Really do. Thank you all for bringing me back out here. I really am inspired by James' presentation. And a lot of the things that James has experienced, I could say I've experienced as well. My background is a bit broader than that, though, and I've been dealing with different federal agencies on issues, including Endangered Species, Clean Water Act, FERC issues, dam issues. I've got clients in the Midwest by the Great Lakes that own earthen dams, so I can tell you that certain things regarding dam licenses don't make themselves available as exemptions. Unless you are a tribal government, they get derogations based upon tribal trust, which is a whole concept that I will elaborate upon later in my presentation. But having experienced through representing the Klamath Irrigation District in Klamath Falls and the County Board of Supervisors for several months, the issues and the emotion behind them, I can certainly tell you from experience that most of the facts don't ever get out. Okay, the journalist that James is describing, the Herald and News up in Klamath Falls, it is the textbook definition of yellow journalism. Okay, they don't speak the truth, they want the truth the way they see it. And it's unfortunately, they even defame people unless you go out and sue them for the false statements intended to harm your reputation. But again, you know, I'm an East Coast guy, okay? I'm from New York. There's not much that makes me blink my eyes. Okay, I even challenge cars when I cross streets. So when these guys in Klamath Falls were trying to intimidate my clients, the Klamath Irrigation District, I kind of laughed at them. And I made them look like fools by turning their words back at them. In Sisikyou, and one of the things we were able to accomplish through representation, both with the Board of Supervisors and with Klamath Irrigation District and with the Sisikyou County Water Users Associations, we were able to develop a bi-state coalition. A bi-state coalition of people across the California-Oregon border that understood that they needed to work together in order to accomplish the goal of preserving their rights. We're talking about land rights and we're talking about water rights, because whatever touches, you know, the water rights are tied to the land around here. Okay, and if you can't get water to crop, you're done. You can't get water to ranch, you're done. You might as well just pack up and walk away and just sell your land for pennies on the dollar. But what we have here, yeah, we have a dire situation this time because this has been going on for 15 years, at least. And every time they keep on coming back, and the method that they use just transforms itself from one shape to another. And they expect that you won't recognize the change. It just takes enough time and enough information to identify the change, and then you have to go back at it. One of the things I've learned in working with Washington, D.C., and dealing with federal agencies, and even the White House offices, is that, there's several ways you can accomplish things. You can accomplish things through working with Congress and enacting laws. Sometimes that works when you can get a Congress that actually doesn't speak nonsense and can get along with itself. Then you've got the magic pen of the White House, the presidential pen of executive orders or presidential memoranda, which can put into motion certain types of activities that the president wants to do but can't get done, either because Congress is obstructing him or because there are legacy bureaucrats within the agencies that aren't following his direction. But the problem with executive orders is, and I think Jim would admit to this, is that executive orders can be reversed upon the beginning of a new administration. So they're only as good and only endure as long as the administration that issues them, and then they can be overturned, and then you got to start from square one all over again. You can also go through administrative process, okay, which is that technical, boring process that each federal agency puts you through in order to, get where you want to go. Okay, FERC. FERC has the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has jurisdiction over natural resource sale across state, electricity transmission, dam management and safety. It has jurisdiction over licenses held by dam holders. Unfortunately, I learned in representing farmers and ranchers out in Montana 2 years ago that dam licenses that were issued back in the 50s and 60s don't look anything like they do in the 1990s, 2000, 2015, 2017. I learned this because I was hired by the ranchers and farmers of Flathead Indian Reservation to stop the transfer of a Category 3 hazard dam. That was Blackstar. Basically, it starts up all itself. It doesn't need the energy grid to start. They transferred this dam to a tribal government known as the CSKT, or Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes. They are the #1 tribe, the first federally recognized tribe out of 567 tribes. Okay. Once you're recognized, you are on the congressional appropriations list forever, unless you lose your recognition. And that's billions of dollars a year overall for 567 tribes, 365 of which have reservations. Okay? But because of the way the federal government has been addressing the guilt of the past 150 years with the way the U.S. government had treated Native Americans, they've come up with a doctrine known as the tribal trust obligation, which has made itself very apparent over the last several years. And that tribal trust obligation doctrine, when you add it to the environmental zealotry that James was talking about in his presentation, which is illogical, irrational, and self-serving, you have two layers of excuse for what the government does to everybody else. Okay? What's happening in the Klamath Basin is basically a reallocation of water rights. Even though, and without the authorization of Congress, even though there is a Klamath River Basin Compact. That compact was entered into between the states of Oregon and California in 1956, signed into law by President Dwight Eisenhower. That compact should be governing, and is, in fact, the only federal law governing the allocation of water between the states of California and Oregon. But the federal government, under several administrations, Republican and Democratic, have just decided not to recognize that compact. It doesn't exist. And what they've done is they've created an entire legal fiction through state-to-state agreements with the federal government sitting in on everything and having its say to, in pursuit of its federal interest, to circumvent this compact. This compact has two provisions, and there's many articles, that basically say that if you want to change the compact, you, being the states of Oregon and California, you've got to either invoke the termination clause of the compact, start from scratch, or you invoke the amendment clause, and you say, okay, we're going to amend it and go through a process of negotiation and to see what kind of amendments we can agree to. They never did that. They just created the KBRA, the KHSA, the Conservation Comprehensive Agreement, as constituent parts of a whole, claiming that it wasn't a compact. Now, there's a whole area of law that talks about what types of agreements that states can enter into between themselves that require congressional approval. And it's not that clear. So what they do is they find the gray areas and they play the gray areas for as much as they can take, or as far as they can take. And nobody knows the difference. They figure, okay, you've got to challenge us in court. You've got to publicize what it is we're doing, and you can't prove it because you don't know what you're talking about. Mickelson, embodies that attitude. Now, Mickelson is an interesting character, and so is Mr. Zinke. Mr. Zinke, on a 1-hour layover at Salt Lake City Airport last year, flying in between Salt Lake City and Medford. And Mr. Zinke is so full of himself. He is a narcissist. He really is. And he has no experience, but they chose him because the people that Mr. Trump had relied upon to advised him incorrectly, and he accepted their advice, this being his son. Okay, now, I can say this only because I was on one of the transition teams for the Trump transition. I was on the U.S. Trade Reps team. I got my White House clearances just after New Year's, and all of a sudden I was invited in to try to go to the meeting. So I called the chair up, and the chair says, "Oh, meet me at my hotel to hang out in Washington, D.C., which is the Swank Hotel. It's very classic, but swank nevertheless." So he said, "By the way, before you come, just let me have your resume." So I gave him my resume. Then all of a sudden he saw all the things I was doing. That was the last time I heard from the guy. Okay, they didn't want a guy that happened to be advising federal agencies in the past on trade and regulatory issues, and a guy who's been fighting the government on dam removal, on contracts to replace a seed plume in a federal project, or even Clean Water Act cases. They didn't want to see any of that. So I was one of the guys, along with other people, that had been actually recommended by former AG Edwin Meese from the Reagan administration to go into certain areas on the transition team. All of us suffered the same fate. We were not allowed in. So there is a deep state up there. There's no doubt there's a deep state. And the rhino culture among them, along with the Democrats, they work the angles together. Now, one of the things that I don't necessarily agree with Jim on is the value of litigation. Okay, litigation can't be relied upon exclusively, but you need to fight. Okay, courage to fight and the will to fight are necessary to beat a government that has the Department of Justice as its law firm. The Department of Justice has thousands of lawyers. I'm in 2 cases right now that I'm dealing with on the East Coast, within the state of Pennsylvania, one on the west coast of Pennsylvania, on Lake Erie, and the other one on the East Coast, right on the Delaware River between New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Both of them are Clean Water Act cases. These are wetland cases. That's where the federal government comes in onto your farm and says, well, that looks like a wetland to me. I don't need any science to prove it, and therefore we've got jurisdiction. You need to stop farming. You know about the Duarte case, right? Okay? Now, they say his ripping isn't plowing. Okay? That goes back to the case, one of the cases that I'm dealing with now, the Brace case. I don't know if anyone knows the United States versus Brace, which was back in 1994. That dealt with the exemption under the Clean Water Act known as the normal farming activities exemption. Okay? Now, did you know that pasturing wasn't considered a normal farming activity? EPA didn't think so. So Mr. Brace, was entrapped within this hall of mirrors of exemptions and then recaptured. You could be exempt from the Clean Water Act because you have a normal farming activity, but if you farm and it somehow enters into a federal waterway, you have a recapture, which means you just lost your exemption. So they got you coming and going, okay? So, we're up against Department of Justice. We're up here against Department of Interior with Department of Justice behind it, okay? I dealt with the Mid-Pacific Director of the Bureau of Reclamation in Sacramento office. And I gotta say, he is one heck of a character. His name is David Murillo. Okay? He speaks with forked tongue. He does not speak the truth. And the problem is that they don't care. So we had negotiated over a contract that they wanted to impose on the Klamath Irrigation District, which would have cost the district's members, the patrons, $10 million plus for them to replace a flume, a historic concrete flume that had been built, I think, back in 1902 or 3. The flume was nowhere to be falling down if you were part of the right board of the Klamath Irrigation District. If you were a member of the right board, that flume had to go down tomorrow. But if you were a member of the wrong board, well, that flume could stay up. Okay, it all depends upon your politics. Okay, they say in Washington, you know, there's law, there's policy, and then there's politics. But you never have a policy without a politics. Okay, and you really don't ever have a law without a politics. There's always some end that a law is enacted to pursue. And somebody politically has that objective to pursue it. But let's get back to Klamath Basin again. Okay? One of the things that I pride myself and the board of the Klamath Irrigation District was allowing me to do, and patrons in the Klamath Irrigation District allowing me to do, was to get to information that was never disclosed by the former boards. And that information was in files. And that information showed that monies were going to places that they shouldn't have gone to without public approval. It shows that there was an agenda to pursue the Klamath Basin agreements to reallocate water because there were farmers that wanted to get free federal money not to farm. And then there were farmers that wanted the farm to be left alone. Okay, so you had about a 50-50. The only problem is the farmers that wanted the federal money had their meetings in secret. They never disclosed the information to the farmers that wanted to farm. It was only after the agreements materialized that everybody started to figure out, well, we've been taken down to the woodcuts. Okay? I remember a stakeholder meeting I was invited to go down to because the general counsel of the Klamath Irrigation District was unavailable. That was that Sacramento meeting in March of 2016, where we had Mr. Bunham, Mr. Bezdek, and I think, I'm trying to remember who the other one. Mr. Sheets, yes, Mr. Sheets. Mr. Sheets is a unique individual. He has a recurring renewable contract with the Bureau of Reclamation, and he's worked on the flooded Indian Reservation in Montana to make sure that those irrigators get their just deserved by having their water rights reallocated to the tribe. And he's working down here to do the same thing. And Mr. Mickelson works with him too. So Mr. Mickelson is more than what he appears to be. But in any event, the Sacramento meeting was about the new amended KHSA that had been disclosed among the closed circle of all-knowing persons who wanted free money. But they did not disclose the text of that agreement to anybody else. Fortunately, I was able to get the text. Aaron had gotten it for me, actually, the day before the meeting. So I proceeded as a newly informed person with members of the KID board and the patrons, and Sisikyou water users were there, and members of the board of supervisors, to ask questions page by page, sometimes line by line, sometimes paragraph by paragraph, and I go, these guys can have it. And I didn't have to raise my voice. I was Mr. Rogers that day. Okay? Which drives them crazier even more because then they can't say I'm acting impolite. See, it's always fun to deal with thieves that way because they have no comeback. And we have photographs. Everyone has photographs of these people with facial contortions. during the course of this question, which is always enjoyable because, you know, you're imposing the pain on them in a way that they can't hide that. But that's one of the ways I help my clients. I do the same thing with depositions. I just came out of 2 weeks of depositions in one of my Clean Water Act cases, and I was just, you know, I had my client farmer there who's been dealing with this issue for 30 years. He hates these people. I mean, would any of you dismiss the thought of doing something not nice to people? Okay, he was very simple. I said, you know, you can't talk, you can't say anything during this deposition. I said, you just sit there with your hands folded and imagine that you're carving them up through my words. We caught them in contradictions. They made admissions of mistakes that they never admitted before. But the point is, you can use the legal process effectively if you use it as a weapon. You have to weaponize the law like the other side does. Okay, I learned dealing with international law in the environmentalist community from Europe that you have to adopt their tactics. You have to adopt sometimes their strategies, tweak it to you the way you need to in order to win. You can push them back, you can win. Okay? There's also the money side here. Obviously, you know, a PUC coming in to take over the dam is an option. Okay, but it's not liability free, it's not risk free. Okay, there's complications. People have to be involved in the enterprise of managing the dams. Has anyone ever thought that maybe the federal government could buy those dams back through federal legislation? That way, you can't have you can't have like an executive order, a new president come in and just undo it. It's a lot harder to undo federal legislation. The federal government can buy these dams. They were once state-owned, were they not? The Top Coast, or between Oregon and California.
Call from Taylor Bill.
But let me ask you this: why, when Mr. Buffett decided to buy the dams in 2006, did anybody protest the fact that he was not going to honor the low-cost block of power that was tied to those dams under the repayment contract? Because there was a low-cost block of power promised to everybody. In Montana, they had a low-cost block of power. When the dam in Montana license was renewed in 1985 during the Reagan administration by James Watt, Interior Secretary, they changed the license dramatically. They gave it basically, they treated the tribe as if they were children. And they basically said 30 years hence, if the tribe still is interested in taking possession of the tribe, they don't have to pay a red cent penny for it, and they get the transfer. Okay? The problem is, nobody, except the people who knew what was going on, knew about the transfer. They didn't know it occurred 30 years prior. They didn't know that even between the time that that 85 dam license was changed to allow for that transfer, they changed it again during the Clinton administration to allow for the Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Reclamation, to have priority implementation rights for the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Water Act. So they built in all these federal laws into the dam's license, which made it very uneconomical for the then current dam owner-operator to continue on. It's the same thing that happened here. You can't get exempt really from those federal environmental and wildlife rules unless you're a tribal government. And that's something that I learned when I was litigating the lawsuit with the dam in Montana. This tribe had gotten derogation after derogation from legal requirements for the transfer of the dam because they were a sovereign tribal government. And the reason they were given that honor of the derogations, the permission, they're on the tribal government, not the members. The members live in poverty a lot of the time. They live in trailers. They don't have full constitutional rights like you and I do, even though the U.S. citizens. There's a bridge Bill of Rights that the tribal governments are only required to provide under the Indian Civil Rights Act of '68. Congress is sanctioning this, but Congress doesn't necessarily know what it's sanctioning. Okay? The point I'm making here is this notion of tribal trust, which is geared toward giving tribal governments more and tribal members leaving them at the mercy of the tribal governments is a problem. And it's created all these types of distortions in the marketplace, all the types of distortion with respect to science, because they don't abide by any science because of the political obligation to honor the tribal trust. Treat the governments of the Native American tribes as sovereign entities. Okay? So when we're looking at the Klamath Basin dams, we've got to look at this as a series of filters. Okay? You've got the ESA filter, which talks about the ecological risks of keeping the dams and how that harms the poor fish. Okay, then you've got to look at the tribal trust obligation to maintain what has been recognized in the Ninth Circuit and only recently recognized in the Federal Court of Claims in Washington, D.C. as the tribal trust obligation. Okay, which means, in a sense, Klamath Takings case, for instance, went on since 2001. The decision was just issued September 29 by the U.S. Court of Claims after being relitigated and relitigated. That even though the irrigators of the Klamath project, many of them had recognized rights to receive water under project contracts. And that took a lot to establish, a lot of time to establish those water rights, because that's all legal mumbo-jumbo interpretation. Even though they had those rights under Oregon prior appropriations, the tribal trust obligation of the federal government recognizes that these tribes had time immemorial priority rights that preceded the formation of the United States, which was inferred from the 1864, or inferred in the case of the Klamath tribe, the 1864 treaty, and then from the Yurok tribe and the Garut tribe treaties, that there were implied rights to water and fish off reservation that the tribes never gave up when they signed the treaties. Okay, they gave up Aboriginal lands for reservation, but they never gave up these implied water rights, which the federal government has taken on as their own in trust as a fiduciary for the tribes. And it's that tribal trust obligation that's driving federal policy right now, under color, part of the time, of ESA or Clean Water Act. And that's what you're fighting here, even though nobody wants to talk about it. Everyone's sensitive about the tribal trust obligation. You're discriminatory, you're anti-Indian, which is not the case. If the tribal governments treated their members with respect and would have passed all the monies that the federal government has paid through congressional appropriations year after year to the tribal members, you wouldn't have had the Kogan settlement, okay, where the federal government was caught misappropriating funds that Congress had appropriated to the tribes, to other sources, for other purposes. Okay, there is no accountability to of tribal governments to account to anybody because they're sovereign. The fiction that was created back in a trilogy of cases from the 1800s in the U.S. Supreme Court lives on today and has been since enhanced, embellished, and taken to an extreme that it's never been done to before. Okay, I mean, internationally, the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights, Mr. Bush previously had not signed on to. Mr. Obama, not only did he sign on to it, he wrote a sign-on statement that basically said, here's how we're allowing our honoring of this tribal trust obligation. And what we're doing is we're giving back tribes their reservations and their Aboriginal lands. We're giving tribes back their Aboriginal water rights, time immemorial. Anyway, this is just a background to go to the next step. Okay? Now, I'm a lot calmer than Jim right now, but, and I'm just as passionate. You get me going, I'll go like that too. But this is not a time I'm not here for stagecraft. I'm here for getting to the bottom line. The bottom line is, you are out of time. You're in the 11th hour. Okay, you've got a supposedly friendly administration that within its ranks has a lot of unfriendly people. The White House, Mr. Trump is not being properly informed, and the information stops at a certain ceiling and doesn't go further. There's got to be a way to get the information to it. Litigation is one of the ways to do it. Public protest, I am an advocate, a strong advocate of public protest, because the Bucket Brigade activities back in '01, they made a very big statement. They made a very big impression on the Bush White House, and they had to come to some type of solution. Okay? Unfortunately, the solution they came to were these basin agreements to reallocate water. Okay, you gotta give them an A for trying, but a D for failing to get to the right reallocation. Okay? For failing to focus on the issues. Okay? I'm a member of the Republican Attorney General's Association, the Republican National Lawyers Association, and one of the things that struck me at the RAGA meeting, the Republican Attorney General's Association meeting this past January, was what their advice was to help the Trump administration. And the chair, Leslie Rutledge, the AG of Arkansas, made the statement, and everyone seconded it, that the best way to help the Trump administration is to sue them into oblivion. Because that's how you're going to get their attention. And that's how you're going to get their attention when you have Obama, including legacy bureaucrats, all throughout the administration. I can tell you my own experience. Clean Water Act case with the Erie, Pennsylvania farmer. We went into mediation. Okay? Normally in mediation, the judge ordered to have all officials with power to negotiate. Ultimate power to negotiate at that mediation. So what happened was, they knew that we were going to make a counterclaim for several $1 million because the way EPA had enforced a consent decree issued by the court disadvantageous to my client. He flooded all of his farms instead of the little wetland area they were intending to keep off limits. So they bring in their lawyer, their trial attorneys from DOJ. But there's nobody else higher up in DOJ with management authority. So I asked the lawyer, I said, where's your authority? Well, I have authority, they delegated it to me. I said, well, where's your written delegation? I want to see it. Well, we don't have to give it to you. We're the government. What we say is true. Okay? But the point is, we found out that Jeffrey Wood, who was the acting Assistant Attorney General for the Environment and Natural Resource portion of the Enforcement Division of DOJ, the ones that bring the lawsuits, he was still acting because his Senate confirmation was held up. It's still held up today. Jeff Sessions hand chose him because he worked for Jeff Sessions, and he's still not confirmed. So we were on the phone call with the judge because the judge was frustrated with me because I was telling him that he shouldn't be deferring to the federal government. He says, in this district, we defer to the federal government. I said, that's totally naive, Your Honor. He said, well, okay, was Mr. Jeffrey Woods confirmed by the Senate? I said, not yet. His confirmation has been held up because of politics. He said, well, okay, then he's not in the line of command. Therefore, he doesn't need to be there at the mediation. Nor does his delegatee have to be there. The bottom line is, you've got a federal government right now with legacy bureaucrats from Clinton and Obama and rhinos from Bush. They're doing things that are against private property and other constitutional rights that you have. You need to draw attention to what needs to be done here. Public protest, follow the Bucket Brigade, is necessary again. You need to join hands across the state border this time. Not just in Klamath, Klamath and Sisikyou together, walking side by side, showing them that this Klamath Basin issue is your issue. Okay? This is your livelihood. This is your home. You need to defend your homestead. Okay? It's obscene that your federal government is attacking your homestead. But it's true. Okay? We're in Alice in Wonderland. Okay? This is true. So you've got to protest. And you can effectively do protest, and the people that were part of the original protest are still around, and they can show you what to do if you don't know. You also have litigation. Now, litigation. One of the things that I was asked by the water users to do, and I did it in painstaking detail to the point where now I have to simplify it, is what and how can we use the Klamath River Basin Compact, if at all, to draw attention to the fact that they bypassed it. It was illegal, and it now threatens your Fifth Amendment private property rights, to devalue your land and your businesses. You can't do it directly because the compact only allows states to go at each other if there's a dispute. But you can do a bank shot, like in pool. You can't shoot the ball straight, you go off the bunkers. Okay? The procedural failure of the federal government to go after to invoke the amendment or the termination clauses in that compact is going to damage your Fifth Amendment rights. And if the states are going to go along with it, even your own state, then you have 14th Amendment violations. Because the states need to honor the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That's the purpose of the 14th Amendment part. Other than equal protection, you also have states must honor the federal Constitution. Now, in order to do that, you need to be able to establish your damages. Okay, because there's a notion in federal litigation known as standing. Article 3, standing means you have standing to sue, which means you are an injured party in fact. Has anybody done a real estate appraisal in the last several years as to see whether the chilling effect of a Klamath Dam removal, what that would have on their land, especially if you're on a lakefront? Okay, you need those real estate appraisals because there's evidence that what they've done has hurt your private property rights. Okay, now, did they do a takings? Takings case is a rich man's game, unfortunately, and you need a lot of money to prove whether private property is taken for public use without paying the just compensation. Okay, and it's a long haul. It can take 15, 20 years, as it has in Klamath, and look at the result. They lost. Okay, they lost because they never addressed the tribal trust obligation argument. They only addressed the water right argument. Now, whether that was intentional is another question, and I don't want to go in there. I'm only surmising that you had lawyers that were not fully informed or had been working for somebody else. But nevertheless, there's also another way to go. And this way is to bring in Mr. Scott Pruitt from EPA. Are any of you familiar with the, I think it's the Pebble mine up in Alaska? Okay, there's a Pebble mine up in Alaska that the enviros and the tribes are going crazy over because it could potentially cause harm to the waterway and one of the largest populations of sockeye salmon in the world. The mine is located 100 miles away from the waterway, but they've still made the factual allegations that it's going to have direct impact. Okay? It's going to go deep enough, it's going to touch the water table, and the water table is somehow going to dribble its way up to the surface and harm the banks of the rivers. So, there's a way to bring in EPA to take away FERC's jurisdiction. Okay? The toxic sediment at the dam reservoir bottoms has never really truly been examined by the federal government. The environmental impact statements were prepared by the Department of Interior. They're concerned about fishes. They're not concerned about human health risk. An ecological risk assessment is a very different animal than a human health risk assessment. Okay? You have mycotoxins in the water column, which are the algae, the toxic algae. That's in the water column, but we're talking about decades upon decades of toxic sediment collecting in each of the 4 dam reservoir bottoms. Okay? There are going to be chemical changes that are for the better, and then there are going to be chemical changes for the worse. But the sampling that was done by EPA back in 2010-11, they only took a few bore samples, and they were shallow samples. They didn't go deep enough. That way, the evidence of any type of toxicity was skewed to be minimal. They never really performed human health risk assessments, which is a whole scientific protocol aimed at seeing whether a given activity will eventually present potential harm to human health and well-being. Okay? There's a way to do this, using both law, using both protest to get the news media involved so you can have a bullhorn, not only in the court of public opinion, but in the court of law. I'm a skeptic, and most people think I'm a skeptic. They know I'm a skeptic with regard to process and procedure. But I still believe that there's an opportunity to use it to save your homestead. Again, you're in the 11th hour. Okay, you don't have many options. If you're on a football field, you'd be thinking Hail Mary. Okay, this is less than a Hail Mary. This is an informed choice. It gives you options. If you do several things at the same time, you can go in and attack the fact that the states are sacrificing your private property rights by violating the Klamath River Basin Compact's procedures that are there as federal law. They're violating federal law. You can then adopt another path of resistance by pursuing the toxic sediments at the bottoms of the dam. Get Scott Pruitt in. The reason I brought up Alaska with the soundbite was Scott just met with the owner of the Pebble Mine, who happened to be a Democrat that advised Clinton and Gore on environment in the White House, and they still wouldn't give him the permit. Obama said, this is a moratorium, we are not giving permits in Alaska. He didn't even consider the permit application. So the due process wasn't getting irrigation, was because they were sovereign, okay? The whole notion of tribal sovereignty is really for the better. With this case, we can get Pruitt involved. He can give us the due process to do the examinations that were never done before. And then we can get the scientists to help corroborate what he needs to look for. So, that's the end of my presentation for now, and then I'm going to open up to Q&A. Thank you very much.